As an Indigenous man, the most sacred role that I'll have in this life is to be a father and a husband. It's more than just shaping the current moment with thoughts and actions, but it's planting seeds of love and wisdom and identity that will bloom in the hearts for the next 7 generations, thus strengthening the continuum of Indigenous consciousness. That's what fatherhood is to me. Thosh, friends and family. My name is Thosh Collins, and I am an Indigenous community health educator from the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community in Arizona. And originally we are called the Onkakamiraotam, the Salt River people. I have not yet had the opportunity to introduce myself to a lot of you that have been following and commenting out there in YouTube land. So I wanted to take this time to be a little bit more formal in my introduction. But as I said, I am an Indigenous community health educator. My work is in Native country. I do a number of things, but to start simply, as I said earlier, on my paternal side, I'm from the Onkakamiraotam. You might also know us as the Pima. That's the name that was given to us by colonization. And on my maternal side, my mother is from Oklahoma, Pahuska, so we are Osage, Wajaji on that side, also Seneca, Onondaga, we're Deer Clan on that side as well. So I come from nations that span all the way from the desert to the plains to the eastern woodlands. But I was born and raised in Salt River, and I have the honor of walking in this life alongside my beautiful wife, Chelsea Luger, who is from the Turtle Mountain Chippewa and the Standing Rock Lakota people. Together, we have an Indigenous wellness initiative that we call Well for Culture. We started it back in 2013, 2014. We created a wellness model in 2018 called the 7 Circles. We wrote a book on it in 2022 called the 7 Circles, Indigenous Teachings for Living Well. I also sit on the board of the Native Wellness Institute. They are a nonprofit organization based out of Gresham, Oregon. I used to attend their events when I was a teenager. I've been sitting on their board for the past 12 or 13 years, so we do a lot of work with them. There's a huge Native wellness movement happening all over, and a lot of the work that's being done amongst the Indigenous people here in the United States and Canada, as well as relatives in Hawaii, New Zealand, Aotearoa, relatives down over in Australia. We're all Indigenous people that all are healing from the reeling impacts of colonization, imperialism. And so we are on this journey of reclamation of health and identity for thriving outcomes down in the future. So that's my work. That's what I do. But I have the honor of fathering 2 marvelous and beautiful children in Aloe Collins and Weston Collins. Those are my 2 loves. That's my entire world. They're everything for me and my wife. And that's what this video is about today. It's about Father's Day. It's about being a father. What does it mean to be an Indigenous father in 2025? This is a big topic right here. And the presentation that I'm going to be giving you today is one that I give in keynotes, I give in workshops. I'm going to try to do a short version here, but it's about Indigenous fatherhood, the role of the Indigenous father. It's a big topic in Native country. And what we are starting to see is an organic shift in the way roles in child rearing has been distributed in the home. And now we are seeing fathers that are doing more child rearing, which is what we didn't see historically, right? Historically, you hear through oral tradition and even through the anthropological record that back in the days, in the pre-colonial days, there was a level of interdependence between everybody in the village, in the community. You had mothers and aunties, sisters, grandmothers that were able to work together and help each other in child rearing. And many times in many Native cultures, you've had the fathers that were in another area that had other duties. Well, we've been dramatically reshaped from the colonial process, right? So now we are starting to see fathers that are at home. We're seeing fathers that are, raising children, and the mothers are making more money. The mothers are in very powerful positions, and they're having their own business, which is a good thing. But it causes us to have to consciously sit down and rethink, what is Indigenous fatherhood for us today? How do the cultural teachings of the past, how are they integrated? How do we maintain the foundations of fatherhood and roles within our families today as we live in this colonial society that we all have been plunged into? We have to evolve objectively. And one thing I want to talk about before I get further in is this idea that I share a lot, that I've learned this through my lived experience in traveling Native country for over the past 20 years. One thing I've noticed that in Native country, Native communities are either in three different states, which is a state of preservation, of revitalization, and even many times evolution. Preservation, revitalization, and evolution. And I'm talking about culture in general, talking about cultural teachings, cultural practices, contemporary practices, contemporary ideologies influencing this. And this is a good thing. Sometimes you'll see Native communities that are simultaneously in all three of those states. And there's a slew of examples that I won't get into right here, but this presentation and this talk, I'm going to be referencing this model here, this framework for understanding about the continuum of Indigenous consciousness, as I call it. And so as Native fathers, we have to objectively evolve. We have to evolve in our parenting. We can't just wander about and aimlessly not having any goals and sort of haphazardly trying things. We have to sit down and create another code of ethics, another sort of teachings that we follow, an ideology, a spiritual ideology that helps to guide us. Because we are living in a society where everything that we know as a Native people, our connection to one another, to the natural world, to the spirit world, it's at odds with dominant society and the way dominant society is set up. When you're trying to navigate this world, you're constantly having to compromise your cultural teachings and such. So now we have to evolve. We have to integrate what we know from our cultural practices, as well as what we're learning from things such as early childhood development, bringing in Western technology where we can, like I'm doing right now, putting these together to integrate a process of going forward so we can thrive as Native people. So we must evolve to meet the demands of our contemporary culture. And as Native people, we have always adapted and grown. We never just stayed stagnant. When a culture does not consciously and organically evolve to meet the demands of their people, it becomes dysfunctional and it ceases to work for the people. And then we see a slew of adverse outcomes in politics and economics, culture. And that has a trickle-down effect that will eventually have an outcome in a bad way on our overall health and well-being and the structure of our people. So we have to objectively evolve to meet the demands of our people here and now. And within this movement of Indigenous fatherhood, evolving Indigenous fatherhood, it requires us to understand the complex and far-reaching effects that colonialism has had on our kinship structures, our social structures, including Indigenous fatherhood. So this is really a journey of the man and the father that's healing, as well as his family and those beyond. So remember that everything that we do in our personal life, we also affect those within a sacred circle and in the larger community. So there's us, family, community, and even the world at large here. So I want to share with you in this presentation, it's going to be a framework for you as a Native father to be able to look at these various circles in your life and to think about some of the things that are being proposed here that might help you on your journey. Also, too, non-Native fathers may like this. There may be some things in here. This sort of pertains to men and fathers in general. So everyone else from non-Native people, you're welcome to check this out as well. So if we go ahead and turn our attention to the screen right here, you'll see Indigenous fatherhood, the evolving role of fathers in Native communities. And there's me and my brother, my daughters. But first, I want to show you even how I was fathered. You know, I grew up very fortunate with a father, my father Tony, which is quite amazing. You know, my childhood being parented and fathered by my dad, because he didn't have a dad growing up. So he had to sort of stumble through his journey of fatherhood. He became a father in his teenage years. Nonetheless, he figured it out, and he's been a great father to me and my brothers and sisters, and he's been a great grandfather to all of my children and all of my nieces and nephews. And he's looked up to in Salt River. He's looked up to by a lot of people. A lot of people look at him as grandpa, as uncle. And he's been a father figure to a lot of different people. So you can see here that we grew up doing a lot of hunting, and I just love these pictures. My dad always had a camera. He took photos, you know, on all of our trips, and we still do this today when me and him go out and hunting. And, you know, I'm so glad that I have this record. But, you know, some of my first early memories of being on the land was hunting, was being out there with my dad and camping and traversing the land. And, you know, we had some memorable times right there. And that this one on the right here, I remember he shot a spiker with his bow right there. and during that over-the-counter tag season, and this was up in the Rim area, northern Arizona. And then the one on the left right there, he's got that nice buck. That one hangs in my garage gym. That same buck right there on the left, that hangs in the garage gym. It's a memory. It's not a trophy, but it's a memory. And I think that's what a lot of trophies are for a lot of you hunters out there. It's a memory. And so yeah, I remember that was one of my earliest times I remember, my dad harvesting a buck, and just the memories that comes back, of the smells of hunting, the smell of wintertime in the desert, the smell of campfire, and the taste of liver, and the laughs between my dad and his friends, and the camaraderie. Those are my first early formative memories as a young man. And so this is how I was fathered. This is my mother right here, Jo. Like I said earlier, she's from Oklahoma, great grandmother, and just has been an amazing life experience being mothered by her. And I learned a lot from her in my parenting and my fathering. I learned a lot from my mom. So many attributes I carry that come from my mom, and I put that into my daughters. So they're great grandparents, and we always provide them the opportunity to be grandparents. So I want to jump into this right here, and I call this a vision of one's journey of manhood. That's the foundation, right, of being a father, is a man. I'm a man before I became a father. So I want to quickly touch upon this idea about the journey of the masculine, the indigenous masculine. And I want to share just a couple slides on this. But this is a whole other talk and a presentation and a workshop and a movement of its own, in reclaiming what it means to be an indigenous masculine in 2025. That's another big topic. I'm gonna save that for another video, but for foundational purposes of understanding, for those of you that are men and fathers, this right here, I wanna touch upon this to give you a foundation before we jump into the fatherhood section right here. I also acknowledge that there are many different types of family structures, many different types of fathers. Some families have two fathers, some families have two mothers, and I respect all of that, the diversity of family structures. I respect all that. So, a vision of one's journey of manhood. You'll see at the bottom it says manhood and wellness, and it says long-term goals for self-mastery. And I believe that that's what being a man is truly about. It's about self-mastery in many different ways, especially living in the society that we are living in today, where we are constantly being coaxed by something that's not good for our overall well-being or those around us in this world today. So I think that you should always have a vision in anything we do. We should have a vision as men. And part of that vision should include right here is your personal health and wellness. That should be included within that. Because if you don't have good health in your spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional well-being, then we can't be present as fathers, as men. We can't be present to our family, to our communities. If we are ridden with disease and disability, we can't be who we can to our maximum to be able to serve and to be present and to enjoy life with those that we love most. The second part of our goals should be about strengthening families, is your existence and your health, whatever sort of skills that you possess. Those should be somehow contributing to strengthening families. That should be a big part of our goal here. You have a role within family and community. You are needed within that. We should be strengthening these areas here. Another part is we should have academic and entrepreneurial endeavors, right? We should want to continue to progress in continuing education, continuing to learn things and increase our knowledge, increase our wisdom, increase our skills. And so, not everyone will go off to college. I'm not saying you need to go to college. I'm not saying you need to go to a trade school to learn another trade. But what I'm saying is that you should have some endeavors in this sense, and you should have, of course, endeavors to be financially stable so you can support yourself and your family in this life, in this day and age. So these are three areas, and these are not more important than the other. They are all equally important. That's why I have them branching from a circle. In addition to your goals of self-mastery, I think that we all need sort of like a mission statement as men. So this is mine right here. As a Native American man and father, my vision is rooted in conscious child rearing. I strive to create a lasting legacy of love and wellness that transcends 7 generations, nurturing not only individual children and families, but also passing down our sacred teachings, lifeways, and languages. Through this commitment, I contribute to the resilience and the sovereignty of our indigenous nations. Now that's my goal. That's my goal and that's my mission as a man and as a father. So I share that. That might be something you might want to do. You might want to mind map that. What does it mean? What's important to you? What do you want in the future? Once again, you already have the structure, you have the framework for creating your vision in these three areas at the top. I think another good and foundational aspect right here is knowing what will guide your parenting. And for me, my example is oral tradition. Now, I'll be in the community growing up and I would hear a lot of elderly people or knowledge keepers talk about, in the old days, this is how they parented. In the old days, they didn't hit, they didn't yell and raise their voices, that they had inherent conscious discipline with their actions in child rearing. So oral tradition, I take a lot from that. My wife too, we take a lot from oral tradition. We try to talk to people all over Native country in this journey of parenting. Another part of that is looking at the recent evidence around childhood development. I think this is really important. I always say that I'm a huge proponent of indigenous ways of knowing and being, and the latest peer-reviewed scientific evidence around things such as childhood development. There's a lot to learn there, and we should learn to look at the science, look at the papers, put that together with oral tradition. In many instances, they complement one another. Science is coming around and proven in their system, in their ways of knowing, in their worldview, what we've already known as Native people, right? So I don't like to pit systems against each other. I say we need to integrate this and take both of these together to make a robust approach into striving for healthy and thriving outcomes. So look at the recent evidence around childhood development. Let that also guide your parenting. And also, how are you parented as well? What are the things that you know worked for you that your parents did? What are the things that you know that doesn't work for you? And I know that's an easy one, especially those people, those of you out there who've had a hard upbringing in your childhood. And there are many things that were done to you that you didn't deserve, that were a result of your parents who were unwell because someone did that to them growing up, or your caretakers. We must be able to look at these certain times in our history, in our childhood, and look at these points of trauma and grief, and for of course heal from that. But we should stop that and let that cycle end there and break it and create a new way of being and knowing, and create a new healthy lifestyle habit in place of that cycle that we have broken. So think about, how were you parented as well? What will you carry and pass on to your children that was good for you that your parents did, or your grandparents, or your caretaker? And what will you leave behind? That's something to think about. Heart intuition. And I love this because, I believe that we are guided through a higher consciousness of great spirit. Some people say God, and some people have various ways of acknowledging that. Whatever it is, there's a great mystery. There's a life force. There is out there in the greater field of consciousness. There is something there. And I believe when we open up our mind and our heart, when we silence that prefrontal cortex that causes us to think too much and overanalyze at times, when we silence that and we open up our ibaduk, our heart, we allow, I believe, these thoughts to come in, and they come in as emotions many times. They come in as feelings, and then we start to process them and think about it. Then we think how to express it in words. Then we think how to act on it. So follow heart intuition when it comes to parenting. That's what I have always done. It's just silence my mind, and I do this. I meditate every day, but I silence my mind. And I used to do this with my daughters when they were both infants and they'd wrapped up. I would silence the mind. I would open up the heart and try to align my heart with theirs, not necessarily syncing the heartbeats, but the energy, the bioelectricity, the spirit, the consciousness, to try to align these and meet them for bonding. And I think through that process, a lot of things came through it. Some things that I do to help calm down the girls when they're having tantrums and fits, I would follow my heart, and I would also take what I learned from childhood development, put these things together, and I would create my own little practice, my own little a way of helping to calm them down. And it was all following my heart, following the heart intuition. And I'll come back to that as we get going in this. I want to share a quote with you because in anything that I do as a Native person, I always take into account the history. We always have to take into account what was done before us, what are the teachings, the practices, and the worldviews of our ancestors. How do we apply that in this setting today? And there's a lot to learn from our ancestors. And many of our people know this. That's why cultural revitalization and preservation is an important thing. But I like to look at the quotes, and my wife Chelsea found this quote right here by Luther Standing Bear, and he wrote this in Land of the Spotted Eagle, page 250. And he says, another most powerful agent that gave Native men promise of developing into a true human was the responsibility accepted by parenthood. The law of self-mastery which the young couple voluntarily placed upon themselves as soon as they discovered they were to become parents. Immediately and for some time after, the sole thought of the parents was in preparing the child for life. And the true civilization lies in the dominance of self and not in the dominance of other men. That's a profound statement by Luther Standing Bear. And I read that and I was touched by that. I thought, wow. And that's the type of knowledge that has to be relived. That's the type of knowledge that has to be implemented within our day-to-day is Native men. So I encourage you, Native men out there, to continue to search for this knowledge and information through oral tradition, and even reading some of our people, our recent ancestors were amazing authors. And when you open the book by, say, Land of Spotted Eagle, you are sort of tapping into their stream of consciousness. And there's a lot to learn in books. It's not our way of learning as Native people, but it is today. Historically wasn't, but it is today. So I encourage you, check out some of these authors of our recent ancestors. So pre-colonial family structures and oral tradition, from what I know, has always told me that women parented together, assisting one another in child rearing while completing daily tasks. Grandmothers and elderly women played special role in child rearing while young mothers worked. Boys usually accompanied moms until about 4. Girls stayed along with mom, assisting in certain tasks. So we know historically that's how, generally in this way, is how our people had parented, and the structures that allowed our parents to parent in the way that they did. And fast forward to today, now we are divided because of work and school, and we are in these isolated units. No longer do we have each other for interdependence. So it's important for us to acknowledge that pre-colonial family structures that our people have always had. Another thing that I like to share too about oral tradition is that uncles are also important. Uncles played a special role in the lives of boys in preparation for manhood. And I know Native country people like to, joke about uncles and such, but uncles are really important. Aunties too, especially some of them who decide they don't want to have children of themselves. Parenthood is not for everyone. A lot of you know that. And for those of you that decide not to have children, you have a special role as an uncle, as an auntie, as a grandparent, maybe if you were older. And so uncles play a special role. And I think about too how, it was said that where I come from, that the boys would probably be around the moms and everybody until about 4 or 5. Then the father would start bringing him around, and they would do things like teaching about the bow. The uncle would come in, and the uncle had the shanchk and the kavak, the shield, and he would spar and play with the young boy and kind of get him used to that sort of behavior and activity. And sometimes children, as parents, sometimes they respond differently to other people that are not them, that are not you, uncles and teachers and such. So this was the role of uncles in child rearing as well. So when it comes to understanding the root causes of a lot of the disruption of our way of life as Native people that I keep talking about, I want to share this slide right here. Colonialism is the root cause of the disruption of Indigenous men's cultural identity. And one of the most, I think, powerful examples of this is the residential school system, the boarding school system that was committed on the Indigenous people. It was an assault on Indigenous people by the United States and Canada. And the whole purpose of the boarding school system was to rid us of our identity, to acculturate us into mainstream society. And I think the hope was that we would lose connection to ourselves and the land. So therefore the land is there for the taking. It's easier. They tried to break the spirit of the people. And obviously it didn't work, because we're still here and we are reclaiming our identity, Indigenous fatherhood included. So that is the root cause. And what happened when our people were taken away and put in the boarding schools? There's 3 major areas that the boarding school system really targeted. Was a loss of land, a disconnection of one another and a disconnection from our spirituality, our indigenous thinking, our identity. And in place of that was Western religious ideology was put into that. And so you have people taken from the land, taken from one another. That really, to me, is the core of indigeneity, is where you are from, who you're connected to, and your spiritual worldview. And so there was an assault on those three areas. So that's why we say that all of the diseases we're experiencing today, such as metabolic disorders, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, addiction, depression, all these things here, they are diseases of modernity. They're symptoms of a people who are out of balance from a loss of a way of life from the colonial process. So let's jump into this slide. Everything that I just shared creates cultural trauma. Group trauma is another word for it as well. It's a phenomenon that is experienced by multiple people and has a negative downstream effect. So as I already mentioned too, clan systems become in disorder. They become in disarray within this cultural trauma. So now we no longer have the roles as men or people in general in our communities, the loss of moral values and roles in clan and community. And this includes the role of men and the role of fathers. That's become in disarray as well. What we also have is an influence by Western patriarchal ideology that, women belong in the kitchen and women are only good for that. And I'm a man, I get to do whatever I want and you got to wait on me and I can take off when I want, come home when I want. I don't know, some of you guys might get mad, some of you guys in dominant society saying that's not what Western patriarchy is about, but what we see is the most negative attributes that are played out, that are influenced within, our community as men. And I always say that we have to be able to differentiate between what is ours as Native men and what is theirs as Western patriarchal ideology. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of positive things and similarities. I understand that. But right now we're sort of looking at a lot of these negative things that are very different from our thinking as Native men and how they influenced us. And what are the outcomes? Domestic violence, sexual assault and abuse, child abuse and neglect, emotional and verbal abuse, male supremacist ideology. That's a big one we are starting to see now. That's a huge movement in dominant society. And I'm very much against that. And I think that, for you as Native men, I really think all men need to be against that. And it's a very harmful and it's a very lost way. It's a very immature thinking. It's a very dishonorable way of walking in this life here, this male supremacist ideology that's becoming big. Also, addiction and depression. Now, these are all the results of a loss of morals and values in the family, in the community, and an influence from Western ideology in general. So I wanted to share that because, for you Native fathers, this is important for you to think about in your own journey. Many of you probably have wondered, why do I have anger? Why do I have pain? Why do I have depression? Why do I have anxiety? And it all stems from our people. We're healing from this colonial process. So contemporary social cultural changes have dramatically increased Native fathers' involvement in child rearing. And I can attest to this personally as well as many other Native fathers. And so let's look at Indigenous fatherhood today. This is my idea of Indigenous fatherhood today in 2025. These are all attributes of Indigenous father. These are characteristics that you should seek to master, you should seek to possess. These are all characteristics that you should have right here. Is empathy, to be empathetic. That's an important attribute to carry, not just as a father, but as a man in general, right? We should have empathy for all things, all people around us. And empathy is something that it's one of the essence of who we are as human beings. It is because empathy that we have made it this far today in these conditions that we have evolved in as human beings. It is empathy that allowed us to be birthed. It was empathy that allowed us all to be nurtured and cared for at some point in our time. Empathy is really critical to our human being, our humanness. And as fathers, we need that and to be empathetic towards our children and to help us to be better fathers and to be affectionate. That's a big part of my journey as a father right here. I give a lot of love to my daughters here. I'm constantly carrying them. I'm constantly comforting them. And I still do certain things with them that I did when they were infants. I still put them on my shoulder and I pat their back, or I pat like a heartbeat, and I'll do breathing with them. And this has been really important in helping my daughters to self-regulate their emotions, and even for me as well. So I still use that today. We need to be a safe space as fathers. We need to make children feel safe. We need to make children feel like they can be free to who they are. They all have an innate personality that's different from us, that's different from their mothers. Something was given to them in spirit, right? And sometimes we have to create a space to allow them to foster that. So it should be safe. These are things I'm working on, because there's been times in the past where my anger gets the best of me and I display aggressive behavior and it scares the girls, and I watch that effect, be with them for the next 2 or 3 days, and it dysregulates their emotion. So it's really important, and I'm learning this myself. I'm there with you as a man on this journey to try to regulate our own emotions and our own journey of healing. We should be uplifting, and this is important too. And when I do activities with my daughter, is really trying to commend them when they're doing a good job, and not having a lot of expectations for them to be expert or to be really skilled at something. Not having expectations, but uplifting them, because this helps with their self-esteem. And that self-esteem, this foundational period with small children, all the way up, and I think from infant stages, and I think someone might say different, maybe in childhood development, but from here, I would say all the way into 18 to 19, 20, the brain is still developing, that the children need that uplifting. They need that self-esteem to be built up, because this is going to help with not only their emotion regulation, but their success later on in life. So be an uplifting father, be virtuous as a father, and be intentional with everything that you are doing as a parent. I think about that every day. Every day you get up, and I, got your variety of things that you have to do. And I think to myself, my intention today with this activity with the girls is to foster a good experience. Or my intention right here is to give the girls a new activity to do that will be good for physical activity. So it's a habit that we can build upon as they age. So I try to be intentional about everything that we're being in with the children. I'll do like a little mindful breathing activities with the girls, and it's all intentional. It's to give them tools. So being an intentional father is really important, and being a prepared father. Now that's more logistical as well, and a lot of us had stumbled through that, but we learn to be prepared when we're taking care of our children, and having things in order, and having all the items that we need to be able to make sure that we can parent properly. And to be dependable, this is one thing that I'm constantly making sure that I'm doing. Am I dependable to my daughters and to my wife? When my wife leaves out of town, I try to make sure that I'm doing things that that she typically would do, so that way when she comes home, she feels like, oh, I can depend on Thosh, because he forget about this, or he didn't let that go. He tried to keep up all these important things, to make a good and safe space for our children. So being dependable. Now, those are sort of attributes. Now, these are mindsets that you can have as a father, as a native father. Is once again, we touched upon this already. Understand the impact of historic trauma on parenting, and then be objective in healing and strengthening and evolving your role as a father. This should be objective. This should be objective in your fatherhood journey right here. And be one who intentionally lives by and passes on teachings and practices to children. So if you have knowledge about the songs, the language, the ceremonies, think about that it's time for you to start passing that on, because it was passed on to you for a certain reason. Now we need to pass it on to the next generation, not just our children, but nieces and nephews, all children in our community. And I think that's what being a good male figure, a good father, has that. And it's important to learn the basics of early childhood development. And I think this even goes for a lot of fathers that have adult children, because maybe you're a grandparent to toddlers and infants, and it's not too late to learn these things here. So learn the basics of that. That's been really helpful for me as well. And as a result of that, it's helped me to intentionally engage in children in activities for development, such as reading, singing of songs and stuff like that, physical activity. These are all important for their development in their brain too, because the skills they're learning in this activities, maybe they may not be doing it as teens or as adult, but you are still developing skills of learning. You're still developing an important attribute in their mind that they're going to use for the rest of their life. And then be one who learns to apply conscious discipline. This is something I'm always working on, and I'll get in a good phase of really parenting in a conscious way. Then I'll get in these little cycles where I lose my patience, I lose my empathy, I become apathetic, and I may raise my voice, I may, put my hand on the table to get their attention. And I try to really, try hard not to be in that way. That's not the way I want to be. But unfortunately, I fall in it sometimes. So I'm still learning myself. But what helps me is reading some of the scientific literature. And building strong life skills will have a nice downstream effect on your children, as well as your own life, making your own life easier, being financially able. I mentioned that earlier about men in general. This is really important. Financially able, financially stable. And have a long-term vision for your family. Think about, what do you want to be like as a family next week, next year, 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the line? How do you want your family to be? Have a vision. A lot of times I wake up in the morning and I do my meditation. I'm thinking about that. I'm visualizing myself as an elderly man, my wife as an elderly woman, and our daughters grown up. So in the house we live in, what the land looks like, and all the time between now and then, I'm working towards that while enjoying the moment. So have a long-term vision for your family. So now I want to share with you some of these studies that I think are really important for understanding children's development. As a father, brain adaptations to fatherhood experiences. Really interesting stuff. And this one is from a study from Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences. Fathers' brains are sensitive to child care experiences. It has been suggested that although maternal caregiving is triggered by a neurobiological process related to pregnancy and labor, the human father's brain adapts to parental role through active involvement in child care. Oxytocin levels are similar in mothers and fathers. Oxytocin is differentially linked with a parent-specific repertoire, for instance, with affectionate contact in mothers and stimulatory play in fathers. And so I think this explains a lot why a lot of us fathers that we bond with our children in different types of play. And that for my daughters, they like to rough play. So we'll toss them on some mountain of pillows and toss them up, and there's something to that, and it helps us with bonding. I feel it too. So it's very beneficial with the father. So understand that there is a hormonal and a neuroplasticity effect with fathering here, as it says with the science right here. This says longitudinal evidence that fatherhood decreases testosterone in human males. And consistent with the hypothesis that child interaction suppresses T, fathers reporting 3 hours or more of daily child care had lower T at follow-up compared with fathers not involved in care. And so I think, what this study had also looked at is that it was basically saying that, the testosterone is lowered in order to be more affectionate and to have less of an aggressive sort of characteristics. And to me, that's amazing. That shows that even hormonally as fathers, that we evolve by the experience of fathering. As it says here, researchers suggest that temporary suppression of T is a biological mechanism to help men shift their priorities when becoming fathers. Pretty amazing. That goes to show that we do evolve hormonally, also from a neurotransmitter standpoint here, that we evolve as fathers. We're not just hardwired and stagnant, right? And my takeaway from this is men's bodies evolved hormonal systems that help them commit to their families. Mothers are meant to have help, and I think that in this beautiful interconnected web of life between child and family and whatever form of consciousness that created us, that we were meant to be together. We were meant to be relying upon one another to thrive in this life here. And also check out this resource, Handbook of Fathers in Child Development. This was published by Springer. I co-authored a chapter in here alongside my buddy, Dr. Allison Burbank. He works at Johns Hopkins. He's a licensed speech pathologist. Check out this chapter that we co-authored in this book right here. So I hope you enjoyed that little presentation about the evolving role of Indigenous fatherhood. I hope that there was something that got the wheels turning, something that was reaffirming what you're already doing, and I hope that you learned something new in that. So in closing, I'd like to invite you to think about this concept that parenthood is a journey of ancestorhood, and generational thinking is a critical mindset to have amidst this heated social political climate that we're living in being able to navigate this world out of balance. I think all people, not just us as Native people, should ask ourselves, what sort of world will we leave behind for our children and their children? These concepts are inherent in our Indigenous way of thinking and knowing and being. And so a lot to say here, but I hope you enjoyed what was shared. That's all I have to share at this time. The Hugay, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please share this video.